The rain had started sometime after dusk, soft at first, then growing louder as it beat against the tin roof. In the dim light of the kitchen, Mira stood barefoot, her hands still wet from washing the dishes. The kerosene lamp flickered weakly, casting long, uncertain shadows on the peeling walls. She could hear Kalavati's voice in the next room, low, clipped, and urgent. At first, she thought it was another argument about money or the price of grain. But then, she heard her name. "She's no good to us," Kalavati hissed. 5 years and not even a miscarriage to show for it. Mira froze, her hand tightening around the wet cloth she had been using. Her name again, this time spat with disgust, like something rotting in the corner of a room. A man responded, his voice rough, unfamiliar. "I don't need a wife. I need help at home. I can't pay much." "You won't have to," Kalavati snapped. "Feed her, give her a floor to sleep on. That's more than she's earned here." The cloth slipped from Mira's hand and fell into the soapy water with a soft splash. Her heart thudded in her chest, but she didn't move. She couldn't. The weight of the words wrapped around her throat. "She'll go with you tomorrow," Kalavati said. "Before anyone in the village starts asking questions. She's your problem now." It wasn't a conversation. It was a transaction. She wasn't being consulted. She was being traded like old furniture. When Kalavati came out a few minutes later, her expression was as impassive as ever. She didn't meet Mira's eyes. She simply said, "Sleep early. You'll be leaving at first light." Mira didn't argue. What could she say? That she had tried every remedy, every prayer, every whispered chant passed down by old women who promised fertility in exchange for faith. That she had watched her husband grow colder with each month of silence from her womb. That she still believed, foolishly, that love might be stronger than legacy. There was nothing to fight for. Not here. Not anymore. Later, lying on the thin mat in the corner of the storeroom where she'd been made to sleep after the second year of childlessness, Mira stared at the ceiling, tracing the leaks where water crept in through the roof. Her sari was still damp at the hem from the kitchen floor. Her hands ached from scrubbing the brass utensils Kalavati insisted must shine like mirrors, or else what use are you? She didn't sleep. She listened to the rain and wondered what kind of home she was walking toward. Or whether it even mattered anymore. The road was slick with fresh mud, and the sky had barely lightened. A gray hush hung over the landscape, broken only by the occasional squelch of Mira's sandals and the rasping breath of the man walking ahead of her. He hadn't told her his name. He hadn't even looked at her properly. Just motioned with his head when she stepped out of her in-law's house that morning, a small cloth bundle in hand, containing everything she owned. They had been walking for nearly 2 hours, heading toward the market town where he said he lived. Mira didn't ask questions. Her silence wasn't passive, it was a fragile dam. One crack, one word, and the grief might pour out uncontrollably. The man stopped once to drink water, tossing the last of it into his mouth before continuing on, never offering her a drop. Her legs burned, her stomach was hollow, but she kept moving. They reached a bend in the road where the trees thinned, and a slow-moving truck rumbled toward them, kicking up dust. The driver slowed as he approached, eyeing them through the open window. The truck wasn't polished or clean, but it looked solid and well used, like it belonged to someone who kept things running with his own 2 hands. The man flagged him down with a wave. The truck came to a halt beside them. The driver leaned over the steering wheel, pushing his cap back slightly. He had a stubbled jaw, tired eyes, and a child's toy, a plastic duck, sitting on the dashboard. "You from around here?" the driver asked. "Need a lift?" the man replied curtly, gesturing to himself and then to Mira. The driver looked at her. Not through her, not past her, at her. Her hair was sticking to her face from the sweat, her eyes rimmed red. But she met his gaze. "Is she with you?" he asked. The man narrowed his eyes. "Why?" The driver's tone changed slightly, still casual, but edged with something sharper. "You sure she wants to be?" "This is none of your business," the man snapped, his voice rising. The driver didn't flinch. He stepped down from the truck, tall and solid, not aggressive but unyielding. "She looks like she hasn't had food in days. She's walking like she's been dragged. So yeah, maybe it is my business." The 2 men stared each other down. Mira stood still, as if caught in a storm. She wasn't used to anyone standing for her, certainly not like this. The man cursed, muttered something under his breath, and finally spat to the side. Not worth the trouble. He turned and began walking the other way, kicking at the gravel with angry, heavy steps. Mira didn't move. The driver turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded, though she wasn't sure why. "I'm Aryan," he said. "I live just a few kilometers from here. I wasn't planning on rescuing anybody this morning. But I've got 2 kids and no one to watch them while I work. You look like you could use a place." Mira stared at him, uncertain, searching for the catch. There was always a catch. "I'm not promising anything," he added. "You stay as long as you want. Or not at all, but you won't be treated like property." Her eyes filled, though the tears didn't fall. She nodded again. Aryan opened the passenger side door. "Come on, it's not fancy." But it's dry, and the kids probably already broke something by now. She climbed in slowly, clutching her bundle. As the truck pulled away, she looked out the window, watching the man who had tried to take her disappear into the distance, swallowed by the mist. She didn't feel triumphant, just tired. But for the first time in years, a tiny, unfamiliar warmth sparked in her chest. Something like possibility. The house was smaller than she expected, tucked between overgrown hedges and shaded by a neem tree. Its outer walls were faded yellow, and the gate hung slightly off its hinges. A rusted bicycle leaned against the side, half swallowed by tall grass. But there was laughter inside, loud, messy, chaotic laughter, and something about that sound tugged at Mira's chest as Arian pushed the front door open. Ria, Rohan, I'm home. Two children came thundering into the front room, one with wild curls and a scraped knee, the other holding a broken toy truck. Both stopped short when they saw her. This is Mira, Arian said simply. She's going to be staying with us for a while. The girl, maybe 5, tilted her head and frowned. Is she nice? She's tired, Arian said. And probably hungry. Rohan stepped forward and poked at Mira's bag. Do you have food in there? Mira let out a small laugh, involuntary and shaky. Just clothes, she said softly. It was strange how easily she slipped into the rhythm of the house. Arian didn't give her a list of chores. He didn't tell her what she owed him. The house was a mess, crumbs on the floor, socks hanging from chairs, a mysterious stain on the ceiling, but no one yelled. No one blamed. Arian worked long hours at a garage nearby, often coming home with grease on his hands and a new bruise or burn on his arms. But he always came home. The first few days, Mira kept her distance. She slept on a folded mattress in the small study and cleaned up quietly in the mornings before the children woke. She cooked because she couldn't help it, not because anyone asked. The first time Arian noticed, he raised an eyebrow. You didn't have to do all that, he said, glancing at the warm parathas on the plate. She shrugged. I didn't mind, and that was it. No criticism, no suspicion. The twins were like puppies, loud, affectionate, and always underfoot. Ria insisted on showing Mira every drawing she made. Rohan asked her to fix everything, from torn storybooks to the arm of his action figure. On the 5th day, he sat next to her on the porch and asked, Are you going to be our new mama? Mira froze. No, she whispered. I'm just Mira. Rohan looked disappointed for a moment, then brightened. Okay, but can you still tell bedtime stories? She did. That night and the next after that. At first, she told them old folktales, tigers in the jungle, talking birds, brave princesses. But then, slowly, her stories began to shift. She invented a girl named Leela who had been forgotten by her village but found a forest that whispered her name. A girl who wasn't magic, but who was loved anyway. Arian listened quietly from the hall some nights. He never said anything, but he started leaving the lamp on for her by the couch. He fixed the broken leg of the study table where she sometimes sat and stitched a new handle on her cloth bag without being asked. One evening, as they washed dishes side by side, he said, You know, you don't have to disappear when I come home. She looked down at the soap bubbles. Habit. Well, he said, his voice even, you don't have to keep it. She met his eyes then, and for the first time, didn't feel the need to lower hers. In this house, there was noise, and clutter, and imperfection. But there was no cruelty. And for a woman who had spent years walking on eggshells, that was enough to begin again. The school was decorated with bright streamers and paper flowers, taped clumsily to the walls by little hands and patient teachers. The air buzzed with excitement and the shouts of children in mismatched uniforms. Parents filled the narrow benches in the dusty courtyard, holding up phones, chatting nervously, adjusting their clothes. Mira sat stiffly in the second row, her sari carefully draped, palms damp in her lap. Ria had insisted she come. Not just Arian, not both of them, her. You have to see my dance, she'd said, grabbing Mira's face with both tiny hands. You have to clap louder than anyone. It was such a small thing. But Mira had felt something bloom in her chest that hadn't bloomed in years. So she came, holding Arian's hand as they crossed the schoolyard with the twins bouncing ahead of them. Are you nervous? Arian asked, smiling as he glanced at her. Mira laughed, surprised. More than Ria, I think. They sat side by side, close enough for their shoulders to touch but not quite. Not yet. Arian's presence was grounding. He wasn't a man of many words, but he had a stillness about him that Mira leaned into when the world felt too loud. The performance began with a skit about trees and tigers. Then came a group song, a clumsy recitation of a patriotic poem. And finally, Ria's group took the stage. She was wearing a pink frock too big for her, with glitter that was already falling off in clumps. Her hair was tied in 2 puffy ponytails, and she looked terrified, until she spotted Mira in the crowd. Ria smiled, a big, open, gap-toothed smile. Then she danced, arms out, feet moving in perfect time to the music. Nothing in the world existed for Mira in that moment but that little girl, twirling like the world hadn't broken her yet. Mira clapped, until her hands stung. After the performance, the children ran off to their classrooms for sweets and juice. Parents lingered in the courtyard, sharing snacks and polite conversation. Arian stepped away briefly to talk to the headmaster, leaving Mira standing near the gate. One of the other mothers approached her. "Your daughter danced beautifully," she said warmly. Mira hesitated. "She's not," she began, but the words caught in her throat. "She's lucky to have you," the woman said, smiling, and walked away. Mira stood still for a moment, trying to hold back the unexpected tears. Arian returned, holding a small brown paper bag. "Come on," he said. "They gave us samosas. I promised Rohan I wouldn't eat his." They walked home together. Ria clutched Mira's hand the entire way, proudly chattering about how she hadn't forgotten any of the steps and how one boy had sneezed right in the middle of the dance and it was so funny. That evening, after dinner, Arian handed her a small, carefully wrapped package. She looked at him, confused. "It's not a big thing," he said quickly. "Just something I saw at the market." Inside was a thin chain with 3 tiny silver charms, an M, an R, and another R. "Mira, Ria, Rohan," Arian said quietly. "It's just letters. Doesn't mean anything, unless you want it to." Mira stared at it, unable to speak. She hadn't worn jewelry in years, not since her wedding bangles were taken off in silence. "Why would you give me this?" she whispered. Arian didn't answer right away. He was looking at her, not with pity, not with expectation. Just with a kind of patience she wasn't used to. "You're part of this house now," he said. "Not because you had to be, but because we wanted you to be." Mira blinked rapidly, clutching the necklace like it might vanish. Ria came running in and climbed into her lap without asking. "Tell us a story," she said. Mira looked down at her, then at Arian, then at the open window where a breeze stirred the curtains. "All right," she said, her voice firm but warm. "Once upon a time, there was a woman made of quiet and strength. And she thought she was lost. But really, she had just been waiting to be found. She wasn't healed, not fully, not yet, but for the first time, Mira wasn't surviving.